This is 35-year-old Douglas Dietre, who can be seen visibly distressed after a shocking revelation about his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheyden. It was only a matter of time before detectives determined whether these tears stemmed from grief or guilt following a reluctant 911 call on May 21st, 2016 at approximately 4:30 a.m.
Who's missing?
It's my girlfriend.
What's her name?
Nicole Vanderheyden.
After the missing report, Doug quickly became the prime suspect as detectives made a shocking discovery just 3 hours prior to his call. The initial evidence also pointed squarely at him, and after rushing to Doug's home, what they found seemed to confirm their worst fears.
This case hits hard. You hear Doug's voice tremble on that 911 call, and it's impossible not to feel Thimmerman's weight. Is he grieving, or is he hiding something? Nicole, a mom of 3, was just out for a night to unwind, but it spiraled into tragedy. The uncertainty here is chilling. It's a reminder of how quickly a night out can turn into a nightmare.
The case, a shocking forensic breakthrough turned everything upside down, revealing a twist no one saw coming. On May 21st, 2016, 31-year-old Nicole Vanderheyden and her boyfriend, 35-year-old Douglas Dietre, had gone out for a night with some friends. Nicole was a mother of 3, so she left her kids with her babysitter to have a relaxing time out at a local nightclub. But things took a disastrous turn when they moved to another club named Sardine Can down the street. But after her disappearance from this club, Doug finally called 911 after waiting for a couple of hours when she became unreachable through her phone.
And what's that last night you last saw her?
Well, I didn't last year. It was probably about 11:30, 12, I'm guessing.
Okay. That's the last you heard from her?
Yep. And I had talked to her on the phone. She was with a couple of my friends in a different vehicle, and then I was flying down there from the west.
The 911 call prompted detectives to a chilling revelation. Only 3 hours prior to Doug's 911 call, they had discovered the body of a woman near a farmyard which had a haunting resemblance to Nicole Vanderheyden.
At first I thought it was a deer because of the rust color in her hair. Then I realized it was a young lady.
The call raised troubling questions. Was this unidentified woman really Nicole? And did Doug report her missing in an attempt to cover his tracks? As per protocol, the investigation began with a couple that night. It was Greg Matthew, Doug's best friend. Officers began interrogating Greg Matthew and wanted to extract a timeline of that night from him.
How did the night start? How did you guys all get together?
We were all going to Steel Panther.
Okay, who was all watering hole?
A big group of our friends.
Greg was already there at Doug's place when detectives arrived there. On arrival, they asked the same set of questions in the initial minutes of interrogation to check any inconsistencies. But Greg managed to keep his narrative intact.
I don't know why Nikki ended up leaving with our group of friends and not leaving with Doug and I. I don't know if she was just like swept up by the group and jumped in the car with them. They were going to go to the Sardine Can.
So who all rode together to the Sardine Can?
All those people on that list besides myself and Doug.
Nicole's emotions had run amok as she felt invisible and irrelevant. Soon, her dissatisfaction escalated into panic. She felt a terrible emotion of loneliness and had decided to leave the party on impulse. But when she went out into the cold night, one concern persisted. Had she made a huge mistake by leaving without Doug?
And from what I heard was, that she's like, I'm leaving, and she started walking, and our friend Aaron...
And where were you guys at this time?
We were in the watering hole parking lot at that point when this happened. So...
What time was this about?
I think probably like 12:15, maybe a little earlier, 12:10, that we were walking out to go to the Sardine Can. So our friend Aaron tried to stop her. He's like, what are you doing? You can't just run off. Just wait. They're on their way here. So then Doug's calling her and talking to her, and she's, yelling at him, and, why aren't you here? Are you with some girl or something? She's getting a little crazy. And, Aaron had texted either Doug or I saying, she took off. I tried to stop her. So, Doug, she hung up on Doug. He called her back.
Who hung up on Doug?
Nikki. point, we knew like she wasn't at the sardine can. And so then the next call, I pulled in and I parked my car, and I'm like, Doug, you know, hand me the phone. Maybe I can talk to her. She
And what
can tell
time
me.
was this at?
I think this is like like 12:30 that this like third call.
You called?
No, he had called, but I could hear her on the phone kind of yelling at him. I said, you know, just give me the phone. Maybe if I talk to her, I can, you know, have her let us know where she is so we can go and pick her up.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to her, and she wasn't making any sense. She was accusing me of being Doug, pretending to be me. And, you know, I'm trying to be, like, logical and rational and just be like, you know, let us know where you are. You can't just go walking around, you know. We'll come and pick you up and we'll go, you know, we'll go back home. And then the call, I don't know if she hung up or the call cut out. But then after that, every time Doug had tried to call, her phone was off. It went straight to voicemail. So I don't know if her battery died right then when I was on the phone with her, but when I was talking to her, she wasn't really making much sense.
Did any of the friends say which way she went?
They said that she went south. Aaron had texted that she went south on Maple. So I don't know if Maple is like the street where that bank is on the backside of the sardine can. If that's Maple, I'm not really, you know, sure about all those roads. So we continued to Doug continued to try to call her, and it just kept going to voicemail. We started to drive around the area and kind of like scope the area out and see if we could find her walking. And we drove around for probably like 25 minutes, and we figured, well, let's go to the sardine can and see if she went back there. And by the time we got back, all of our friends had left, and she wasn't there. So we went.
Did you talk to any employees of the sardine can?
Not employees, but I talked to a bunch of the people that were out on that. And like the open, yeah.
What time was this that you went back to sardine can?
Man, this must have been at about 1:15 that I started to ask people. And I asked this one guy, I'm like, did you see a blonde girl, you know, out here? And he's like, Nikki? And I'm like, yeah, you know. But, so he's like, yeah, you know, she left a while ago. And then I asked another guy, and this other guy knew, you know, said her name too, which I know that sounds odd, but Nikki can get very outgoing and adventurous, you know, where she'd be like, what's your name? You know, I'm Nikki, you know, like, that's something I've seen her do before to strangers, so I mean, I know that could, you know, that she could be very friendly in talking to people, you know, in almost a naive way, but. So we stayed there for about 20 minutes talking to people and, you know, hoping that she would come back. And Doug was still trying to call her. And then we drove around. I mean, at this point, it probably was like 1:30, 1:40. We drove around for a while again, you know, going up and down streets, trying to find her. And then, you know.
Nicole's loneliness that night breaks my heart. She felt invisible, swept up in a crowd, and walked away into the cold, desperate for connection. It's so human to want to be seen, but that vulnerability exposed her. This case shows how emotions can drive us to decisions that change everything. How many of us have felt that same ache?
At first, Doug appeared visibly distressed in light of the uncertainty that was lingering around Nicole's disappearance. But the officers needed to determine whether his tears were a genuine expression of grief or a cleverly devised tactic to divert attention away from him.
So what we want to do is kind of review a couple of things. Actually, we're going to review what you had talked about earlier with Tracy. And then we had spoken to Greg earlier, okay? And he kind of gave us a timeline of what you guys all did last night and, you know, what he did today.
With a timeline of that night already in hand, all that remained was connecting the dots to uncover the truth behind Nicole's disappearance.
And I tried calling back a few minutes after that a bunch of times, and it kept on going straight to voicemail. So either way, it's either off or she's on the phone, but for some reason There's usually a call waiting on her, but,
Right.
so I was figuring it was off and had died.
Okay.
She had been using her phone a lot, using Snapchat and stuff like that at the concert. So that does drain the battery a lot, so I kind of figured, the phone had died.
Right.
And she's bold and
Him during the investigation. Then there was Nicole's sister, Heather, whose testimony raised further suspicions about Doug. However, Doug's conversation with her that night clearly revealed his frustration with Nicole's behavior, adding another layer of complexity to the case. But soon, the detectives will uncover a shocking twist on this case that would bring an entirely different point of view on this tragedy.
Him saying, any chance you've heard from Wild Woman? I said, no, have you found her yet? Because I was at work, so I didn't come till later. And he said, no, I'm not. I do not have my phone either, so pretty complicated at this point. I'm very concerned she better be in jail. I can't answer a call, I'm only on my desktop. So where's your phone? Do you have a card? Did you call the jail? I called and she's not in there. And then he said, I just found my car, phone, no card. I didn't call the jail, but I didn't answer. She's hung up and those are 2 months ago.
When was that?
Saturday.
Doug's apparent concern for Nicole's condition seemed genuine, yet there was still a possibility that it could be a very calculated move to divert attention from his own involvement, because as the interrogation unfolded, Heather revealed the dark truth about their relationship dynamics. This cast Doug in a shadow he couldn't escape.
I guess at the beginning of their relationship, she just kind of knew they were both. She had a hard time. She went through divorce, and then she had a rough couple of years. And then she met Doug, and she's like, well, we're both kind of crazy, and we won't get together, and it'll work, and stuff. And then a couple months later, she found out she was pregnant. She came to me, and she wanted to get an abortion, but I told her to keep it, because I had gone through the same thing, and I did it, and it's the biggest mistake I've ever made. So I told her to keep it. You'll regret it.
Heather was worried about her sister, who had been struggling for the past few years. Acknowledging Nicole's history of severe mental health challenges, it was no surprise that she felt emotionally overwhelmed that night.
What do you know about that, or when did that start, that you
From the
became?
beginning.
Okay. And so he is controlling, and he gets mad when she doesn't return his calls or texts.
And also, there was a couple times where he basically, since the baby was born, hasn't really been there as a father, and he'll just go out and drink all night long and not come home. And then when my sister, she tells me, this is her side of the story, but when my sister asked, where were you, he got mad and said, it's none of your business.
Okay. And when was this that this happened? Do you remember?
Not really. There's just so many incidents.
Okay. So many.
Just situations like that. It was every other day. She was just really depressed.
Okay. Was she on any medications for depression?
She tried. She couldn't do it. It made her go crazier.
When you say crazier, what does that mean?
Well, I don't know. She just had her thoughts and minds. She just couldn't handle it.
Did she ever discuss any suicidal ideations?
She's herself in the past.
When was that?
I think 2 months ago.
Okay.
Throughout the conversation, Heather appeared visibly emotional as she revealed troubling details about Nicole's past. She spoke openly about Nicole's previous marriage, explaining how it ultimately led to her relationship with Doug. But the story didn't end there. Heather described the many struggles that Nicole and Doug faced in their own marriage, constant tension, unspoken resentments, and unresolved issues. She also revealed that Nicole had been battling severe depression for years, even attempting to end her life in the past. This insight shed light on the immense mental and emotional toll Nicole had endured long before the tragic events unfolded. Becca, Doug's ex-girlfriend, whose testimony offered additional insights into Doug's character.
So can you tell me some of the issues that are of concern that you think that maybe I would be interested in during that period of time? Sure.
It was right before I moved in too, actually. We got in a fight, and he tackled me. I broke my ankle.
Hold on a second. And before we get into it, so there was that one call where he was arrested for domestic violence, right?
That was when I already had moved out back into my.
Is that one of the last incidents?
Yes, that was
Okay.
the last incident.
And was Was there any other police contacts?
No. Well, yeah, but not with any arrests.
Okay, and what other police agencies?
It would have been probably Brown County, because we were living in that house,
Okay,
and
so that would be Brown County?
yeah,
Okay, and
they were called there.
for domestic violence issues?
Yeah.
How many times?
One for sure I remember, but I think just the one. The cops actually came, because my friend called, because she was worried for me, yeah.
Okay, so let's get to this ankle, and then just whenever we get to that incident where the cops were called, just remind me of that. So, right before you moved in, he did what?
We got in a fight,
Okay.
tackled me, and I broke my ankle, so, I mean.
Which ankle did you break?
My left.
Where did he tackle you?
We were in his bedroom, we were fighting, and he came at me.
Did you go to the hospital at all?
I did.
And what kind of treatment did you get?
They referred me to a specialist, and then he had to give me 2 surgeries on my ankle, and then I was in a cast for probably at least 2 months, maybe 3. I couldn't
What
walk.
did you tell the medical people happened?
I tripped over my dog going down the stairs,
Why did you tell them that?
because that's what me and Doug decided to tell them.
Okay. And when he tackled you, why did he tackle you?
Because we were good at fighting.
What do you remember which
I
video?
don't.
And what was the purpose of him tackling you?
I don't know, he was probably mad, and he got mad.
Okay, so after he tackled you, obviously you were in pain. And
Like extreme pain, like I was like, we had to stop fighting, I had to go to the hospital, yeah.
did he take you?
Yeah.
Okay, but you guys discussed what you would say?
Yeah.
Okay, and the reason why you decided to cover for him?
Well, it's because I loved him and he wouldn't get in trouble, and then, everything would be fine.
Rebecca's testimony painted a disturbing picture of Doug. She revealed that he was not only abusive, but also controlling and manipulative, going so far as to pressure her into lying about an injury at the hospital. Her account was just one of many that instances his pattern of manipulation.
Let's talk about, if you can't remember specifically, when you would argue, it would be...
He would spit in my face.
Okay.
He would, throw stuff, break stuff, and I would too.
Okay, would you ever spit in his face?
I would not spit in his face. I've never,
Okay, so I'm just going to differentiate who did what. So spit stuff would just be him. And throw stuff, break stuff would be both of you?
Yeah.
Okay. And what else? Yelling, swearing?
Yeah. Well, and just really, he was really controlling, he was really manipulative.
Would that be just him or both of you for yelling and swearing?
Both.
Okay. And then go back to, so then controlling and manipulative, what do you mean by that?
Well, one example, he would, I worked in Appleton at the time, and I would call him when I got done, and then I would drive home. And if I was like 5 minutes early, he would say, why are you speeding? You can't get speeding tickets, you're going to lose your insurance, it's a big deal. But if I was 5 minutes late, well then it was, where did you stop? Who are you talking to? Why are you late?
Interrogating Rebecca simply increased suspicion the detectives had towards Doug. She also reveals another incident of Doug's abusive behavior.
There was an incident that was reported to the Green Bay Police Department that was choking in that particular incident. Was there any other choking besides that particular incident?
That incident that was at my house in the upper,
right.
700 South Irwin, it probably was, or 1280 Cass. There's 2 addresses.
Gotcha.
He was choking me. He put the sheets from my bed into my mouth, like as much as he could, until I couldn't breathe. So I wouldn't scream, I'm assuming.
Okay.
The school across the street called the police because I heard me screaming.
Hearing Rebecca's story about Doug's abuse makes my stomach turn. The control, the violence, it's a pattern that screams warning signs. Yet Nicole stayed, trapped in a cycle that many can't escape. It's infuriating to think how often these red flags are ignored until it's too late. This isn't just a case. It's a wake-up call about toxic relationships.
The case took an unexpected turn 18 days after the arrest of Doug, when the forensic results came in, providing a significant breakthrough on Nicole's disappearance.
When they found her body in the field, she was wearing one sock. DNA was found on that lone piece of clothing on her body.
The DNA that was found on Nicole's sock was run through the system, and it was later revealed to be identified as belonging to George Burch.
The DNA evidence led authorities to George Steve Burch, a man already known by the police for his criminal history and had previously been arrested in connection with a hit-and-run incident. After monitoring him for a period on June 8, 2016, officers took him into custody for questioning. During the interrogation, Burch chose to remain silent, refusing to provide any statements.
So obviously you're brought here in handcuffs, right? Which means you're arrested, so you have the right to your Miranda rights. Are you familiar with those rights at all? Okay, so before I speak to you any further about my investigation, I want to read your Miranda rights and see if you're willing to talk to me, okay? The reason you're here is in reference to a homicide investigation into Nicole Vanderheyden. Okay, so is this something that you want to talk to me about?
Yes, sir.
What's that? You don't want to talk to me about that? So if I read your Miranda rights, you don't want to talk to me?
Yes, I would prefer a lawyer.
Okay. Let me at least fill this form out here.
During the interview, detectives seized his mobile phone to investigate his conversations with Nicole, since he claimed to have exchanged a few messages that night. Officers uncovered an email ID and traced Burch's GPS position using Google Dashboard, and that was it. They found Burch's exact position on the night of Nicole's death. GPS indicated that he was in Richard Cranium's, a pub half a mile away from Sardine Can. At 2:30 a.m., the data showed his presence at Nicole's apartment. At 3:52 a.m., it was clear he was at the farmyard, where Nicole's dead body was eventually recovered. It was only a matter of time. The truth was already waiting.
That before May 21st of 2016, you never met Nicole Vanderheyden, correct?
20th to 21st, yes, sir.
The first time you ever saw her was when you observed her in that bar that night at Richard Cranium's, correct?
Yes, sir.
The truth is that you were attracted to Nikki from the moment you saw her, right?
I thought she was attractive, yes, sir.
When did you decide that you were going to have sex with her?
Later on, after we had hung out together, and we had both expressed we were into each other.
You drove her to an area that you'd never been to, that you were not familiar with at all, correct?
Yes, sir.
You drove her down Broadway, you crossed the bridge into Pier, correct?
I believe so. I'm not familiar with the area, but if you say so.
You drove Nicole out in front of her house, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's the truth. You parked there. You had every intention of having sex with Nicole that night, correct?
I was hoping that was the way it was going. That's the way it seemed like it was leading, yes, sir.
So Nicole would rather have sex with you in front of her neighbor's home with your butt hanging out the door of the car than ask the babysitter to go home?
Sir, I don't know.
Did she tell you that she was uncomfortable?
Not that I recall, sir.
You said that you were having sex with Nicole while she was in the backseat of that car, right?
Eventually, yes, sir.
And what did she tell you about how painful it was?
It wasn't gentle, no.
It was painful.
That I don't know.
What really happened was you drove Nicole home 20 miles away from where you lived, fully expecting that you were going to have sex, right? When you get there, and it becomes clear that Nikki isn't going to have sex with you, when she attempts to go into her house and leave your vehicle, that's when your mood changes, right?
No, sir.
That's when things get aggressive, don't they?
Not at all.
That's when you grab that cord and strangle her, don't you?
No, sir, not at all.
That's when Nikki gets slammed on the ground repeatedly when she's trying to run toward her house, when those bloodstains lead in the direction back to her home. Nikki was strangled. She had a fractured jaw, correct?
I don't know, sir. That's what the medical examiner said, but I can't speak for sir. I'm not a doctor.
You heard all of that, right?
Yes, sir.
You saw her injuries. You sat through court to see the defensive injuries to her hands, to her feet, to her palms, to her fingernails, as she fought for her life, right?
According to what the doctor said, yes.
And you say that Doug Dietre did this, but of course, you didn't see that happen either, did you?
I cannot say for certain, no.
You never met Doug Dietre before that night, right?
No, sir.
So rather than just beating you or killing you in the middle of the street, he decided to enlist you, a total stranger, to help him dispose of the body of his girlfriend?
I don't know what his plans were.
He had you drive them to a remote location, correct?
Yes, sir.
He thought it would be a good idea to have a complete stranger know where he's dumping a body?
I don't know what he thought. You'd have to ask Mr. Dietre about that. We were at the descent, so I don't know how far that goes down. I'd never been there before, so I couldn't tell you exactly how far I was down there, and it was dark.
You were down the embankment?
We were not at the bottom, no. It was still inclined.
And Doug was coming down the embankment with you?
He was standing in front of me. As I was looking in that direction, he was in front of me in the incline like this. He was not ahead of me. He was.
The twist with George Burch shocked me. Doug seemed guilty, but the DNA and Fitbit data flipped the script. It's a gut punch. Nicole's death wasn't about her relationship, but a random act of violence. Her story reminds us how fragile life is and how consent and boundaries must be respected. Let's honor her by learning from this tragedy.
Data of that night with his Fitbit. It clearly showed that he was not even near the crime location, absolving him of all suspicion. And ultimately, the court came up with their verdict on March 1st, 2018. George Burch faced trial for first-degree intentional murder. Prosecutors used DNA, mobile phone records, and Fitbit data to paint a detailed picture of Burch's behavior that night. The jury found him guilty and sentenced him to life without parole.
The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, George Stephen Burch, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, is charged in the information. It is signed by our foreperson and dated this first day of March, 2018.
Nicole Vanderheyden's tragic death is a heartbreaking reminder of the devastating consequences that arise from unaddressed emotional turmoil, toxic relationships. Though she struggled with personal demons, Nicole was not defined by her past. She was a vibrant, extroverted woman seeking connection and meaning in her relationships. Too often, women are unfairly stigmatized, with their social or casual interactions misinterpreted as invitations for something more intimate. Nicole's fatal disagreement with George Burch serves as a heartbreaking example of how these misguided perceptions can escalate into violence, taking her life far too soon. It's crucial that, as a society, we break down these stereotypes and redefine the narrative. Nicole's story serves as a powerful call to action, not only for better support for those struggling with mental health, but also for a deeper respect for personal boundaries, consent, and the dignity of every individual.